Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to begin the public meeting for the Active Erie Transportation Plan. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Rob Lee. I'm the Communications Director for the City of Erie. Tonight, we will have a review of the Active Erie Transportation Plan, the process, the timeline, and the implementation. And joining us for that is Dan Fritz from WRA. Following that, we'll have Jason Check, the Deputy Solicitor from the City of Erie. He'll be explaining the parking exceptions. After Jason's presentation, we'll then open it up for public comment. If you are speaking, there's a sign-up sheet in the back on the little table there. Please sign up. When we're ready for public comment, you'll line up on that side of the hall. And you'll come to the podium, state your name and your municipality, and then we'll limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and then questions will be answered following the public comment section. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dan Fritz from WRA.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks everybody for coming this evening. I know this is a great project that everybody's here to find out more information about. And we want to go to the next slide, show you what the agenda is for tonight. So we want to cover a little bit about the background and history of this project, the Active Erie project, and the Greengarden Bikeway. We also want to cover the Greengarden Bikeway design and how that's evolved throughout this process. Also, I'll cover a few rules and regulations for bikeways and also the feedback that we have heard to date. And then lastly, I'll cover a few next steps in this process. So like I mentioned, the Erie Bikeway project and the Active Erie Transportation Plan has a very long history. Back in 2015, a bike lane on Greengarden Boulevard was identified as a desirable connection as part of the Erie Urban Bike Loop Trail. So this project's been talked about for quite some time. The picture that you see on the screen is actually a map from the Erie Urban Bikeway Plan, and you can see that Greengarden Boulevard, if you click to the next slide, is actually highlighted yellow, and it was identified early on as one of the key routes along this corridor. It would connect to the Bayfront Parkway Trail on the northern end and at 38th Street on the southern end. So based on the aspirations of this project, it was eligible for funding through PennDOT and the Erie MPO. So the Greengarden branch of the Erie Urban Bike Loop Trail appeared in the Erie County Long Range Transportation Plan as early as 2017. So just to make everyone aware that no city money is being used on the development of this project or the Active Erie Plan. The southern leg of the Erie Urban Bike Loop Trail, which is along 38th Street, was marked with sharrows by PennDOT during a paving project in 2017. So that project is completed. In 2019, the City of Erie secured funding through the PennDOT Erie MPO, which is the local planning organization, to study bicycle and pedestrian transportation needs throughout the whole city. And that was the creation of the Active Erie Plan in 2020 and 2021. So the Active Erie Transportation Plan, the purpose of that is to create a blueprint for better walking and bicycling conditions throughout the city. That plan was presented to City Council on February 3rd, 2021, and subsequently was adopted by City Council. So the goals of the Active Erie Transportation Plan are to improve safety, and no matter how you're traveling. So that includes walking and bicycling and really another goal is to make walking and bicycling convenient, healthy, and affordable. So some folks don't have a choice as their mode of transportation. And so based on some studies, there are approximately up to 18% of Erie City households do not own a vehicle for transportation. They walk or bike or use some other mode. So that's a rather high percentage of folks that rely on other modes of transportation besides vehicles. So the Active Erie Plan was led by a steering committee of folks that you see on the screen. It was comprised of numerous stakeholders, everybody from City of Erie folks, the traffic engineer, also the public school system, public transit, and PennDOT was also involved in that. So we had a rather large steering committee that helped guide this process. Unfortunately, when the process of developing the Active Erie Plan started, it was at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as a result, in-person meetings were put on hold, and we had to pivot to more online surveys and virtual meetings. So an online survey and interactive map was created through June 7th to July 31st back in 2020. And as part of that survey, we received 328 responses, which is pretty decent. There were also numerous advertisements and mailers that were sent out. We also held 2 online listening sessions. And lastly, we created a moving mobile workshop that was held in October of 2020. So this was our way of outreach to the public in as personal of a way as we could at the time, given the circumstances. So the next couple slides, I'll discuss some of the survey results we received as part of the Active Erie Plan. So the first results that I show here, the majority of survey respondents drive a car as their primary mode to get around the city. But what's interesting is a large percentage of people also walk and bike as a mode of transportation. As you can see, secondary and the third is ride a bike. So it is prevalent. The next survey question was asked: if you don't currently ride a bicycle to get to your destination or don't like to bike as much, why? What are some of the reasons? And I think this kind of gets to the root of the Erie Bikeway, Greengarden Boulevard Bikeway project, in that 50% of the respondents said there's a lack of safe bicycle infrastructure to get around the city. And so second to that was drivers do not yield or stop for people who ride a bike. So there's definitely a need for additional bicycle infrastructure throughout the city. So the next step was creating a low-stress bicycle network. So this was kind of the guidebook for laying out the various routes and bicycle network throughout the city. So we approached this by using recommendations from some federal highway guidance, which is based on the 7 principles of bicycle network design. And those include safety, comfort, connectivity, directness, and cohesion of the network. So the results of that exercise resulted in a plan for 7 north-south bikeways, one of those which is Greengarden Boulevard. And then the next slide shows 4 east-west bikeways, one of which is 38th Street, which is currently completed, and I believe 6th Street is going to be underway here shortly. So the Erie MPO allocated $350,000 in the 2021 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program for construction of the Greengarden Boulevard Bikeway. Greengarden was selected for funding first because it had been identified so early on in the process, and also it had some of the least impacts, didn't require moving curbs. It was mostly pavement markings and signage to complete the project. So funding for the Greengarden Bikeway project allowed the project team to figure out exactly how to design the bicycle infrastructure along Greengarden Boulevard. And to do that, we used various state and federal design guidance, which you can see listed there. There's numerous resources out there, but these are just some of the guidebooks that we used in developing this design. So we began by using the Bikeway Selection Guide to determine what bike facility type is preferred along this segment of Green Garden. We limited that to trying to accommodate what we could, like I said, between the existing curb lines and not incurring additional expenses. So you see on the next slide, this portion of Greengarden Boulevard has relatively low volumes by the shaded yellow area. The estimated traffic volumes are between 3,000 and 7,000 vehicles a day, and the posted speed limit is 25 miles per hour. So based on that, the preferred bicycle facility are bike lanes, and preferably buffered bike lanes, some sort of painted or physical buffer. So this project includes funding for pavement markings, which include everything from shared lane markings or sharrows between Bayfront Parkway and 12th Street to buffered bike lanes between 12th Street and 16th Street, and also between 26th Street and 38th Street. Also, the bike facilities would include are being accommodated through lane narrowing and the removal of on-street parking. So next I'll cover the project area block by block to show what the current design is. So the first block you see here is between the Bayfront Parkway and 12th Street. Like I mentioned, this area is being accommodated through shared lane markings. Also, I want to point out that the traffic signal at West 12th Street currently has accessible pedestrian signals. I think those were recently installed as part of a separate project, but that's a brand new traffic signal at that intersection. The next block is between West 12th Street and West 16th Street. So directly south of 12th Street, we are maintaining a bike lane in each direction and keeping the current left turn lane at the intersection. We didn't want to affect any of the turn lanes throughout the corridor. We wanted to maintain existing operations as they are today. But just south of the left turn lane is where we begin bike lanes with a painted buffer. So that extends all the way to West 16th Street. South of 16th Street is where we enter the narrowest portion of the corridor. In this area, we're able to accommodate a travel lane in each direction as well as a single bike lane in each direction. The next section is between 21st Street and 26th Street. So in this area, between 21st Street and 25th Street, it's also fairly narrow, so we maintain one travel lane each direction, as well as a single bike lane in each direction. And then as we approach 26th Street, we transition into shared lane markings, and the reason for that is to maintain the existing left turn lane onto 26th Street. And also at 26th Street, that signal is slated to be upgraded here in the near future, and it will also have accessible pedestrian signals at the conclusion of a separate project. The next section is 26th Street through 32nd Street. So this is the Greengarden Boulevard section. This is where we transition to the removal of on-street parking, and we introduce a travel lane each direction and bike lanes with a painted buffer. So I just want to point out that these blocks will now have a buffered bike lane instead of on-street parking. And the last section of the corridor is between 32nd Street and 38th Street. So I want to point out that 32nd Street, the traffic signal there was recently replaced. It now has accessible pedestrian signals and all brand new infrastructure there. But at this point, the one single travel lane in each direction with the painted and buffered bike lanes will continue all the way down to 38th Street, where it will transition back to shared lane markings, and riders will be able to either transition to 38th Street or wherever their destination might be. Also, I want to point out that the shaded design plans that you see a little snapshot on the screen, these are still available on the City of Erie website. I provide a link there. I checked the link this morning, the link still works, so if anybody's interested in viewing those, they are still available on the City of Erie website. So now I'll cover some of the public feedback that we've gathered thus far. So back on January 18th of 2022, we had a public plan review and comment period. There was also a recorded presentation that was posted on the City of Erie website. So based on that, we received some early public feedback and made some modifications to the design. Again, in January of 2023, we held a virtual information session. And for that session, there were letters sent out to all the residents along Greengarden Boulevard. So everybody was notified about the meeting. And again, on February 15th, almost a year ago, we held an in-person public meeting here in council chambers where the bikeway design was presented. We again gathered additional public feedback and made some revisions as a result of that. There was also an online survey that was conducted between March 17th and March 31st of last year. That online survey gathered 676 responses, which I'd say is really, really good. And based on all that feedback, there was a council study session held in April, and some of the outcomes of that design study session included the removal of the vertical delineator post. That was something we heard from the public. That's part of the physical separation I mentioned. That's preferred, but as a way of compromise, we removed those physical delineator posts and we just went with a painted buffer. And then also there was the beginning of a no parking ordinance with exceptions that was discussed. And that'll be covered after the presentation here, the final outcome of that ordinance. So I have a couple rules and regulations I wanted to review. Folks may be familiar with these, but both in the Pennsylvania Vehicle Code and the City of Erie Code, bicyclists are required to use hand and arm signals to communicate their turning movements. Just kind of signaling, where they're going and kind of claiming their right of way as a part of that. And then the second regulation I wanted to cover is part of the Pennsylvania Vehicle Code. So motorists must allow at least 4 feet when passing a bicyclist. And, ideally that's accomplished through painted buffers or some sort of buffer adjacent to the bike lanes where that can be accommodated. And then the last slide I have here is about next steps of the project. So the project has been under design for quite some time. The original bid documents were advertised in July of last year, and bids were opened in August. Unfortunately, but not surprising, those bids came in a little high, and it was also determined that the contractor who won the bid wasn't qualified to do the work. So we revised the bids, removed some of the work to reduce the scope and budget of the project, and it was re-advertised in September of last year. Bids were opened in November, and again, the bids came in slightly high, but additional funding was requested from the Erie MPO, and that additional funding was granted. And I believe on January 17th of this year, Council had a first reading to allocate the funding for construction of this project. And on February 7th, hopefully Council has a second reading to allocate the funding for this project and award the contract to the contractor. So that's where we're at right now. And again, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And if you have any feedback, we're going to take some public comments here in a little bit. But I also listed Bill Hayden's name and email there. He's a City Council, City of Erie project manager for this project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason to cover the no parking ordinance. Thank you.
Good evening, can everyone hear me okay? Thanks. I'm Jason Check. I'm the Deputy Solicitor. I've been entrusted with going over what are some of the proposed exceptions that are in an ordinance that's been worked on. And I think some or most of those you may have seen already in the press release that was sent, I believe, last week sometime. So those were pretty much taken from the proposal. But essentially, I'm going to go over them, and then the goal here is to let you know what the proposed exceptions are, and then during public comment, if you have literally any commentary or question or concern, the goal is to take some notes and take those into consideration when finalizing this. So I'm going to say this isn't set in stone. It's got to be finalized, edited, polished, and then it's got to be presented to City Council and the mayor for their consideration, if that makes sense. So there are 17 exceptions that I have in my draft. Now the first 6 are what I call kind of like the common sense exceptions, and these really relate to safety. So we're in the process of creating bicycle lanes, obviously for bicyclists, but we also want to make sure there's awareness and safety of like who can use the bicycle. And so obviously, in case of, say, an emergency, so the 6 exceptions, if I go through them, 1, you got ambulance, police, and fire. Well, we want to make sure that the bicyclists know that even if they're in the bicycle lane, they do not override an emergency. Okay, that's kind of common sense. The second one is activities engaged on, say, the Erie Metro Transit Authority or another public agency. So you can't get in the way of a bus is pulled over to let passengers on and off. They're allowed to use the bike lane. The other ones were, utility, like we had all those windstorms recently, and so people lost their power, so they don't like who's fixing that. So if a utility truck is doing some sort of maintenance or repair, another vehicle is associated with, garbage collection, obviously they're gonna pull over if they might be in a bike lane. After doing some pothole repair or something seasonal, so anything that's kind of government related or public service related, those are exceptions to the bike lane. Now, the other ones, so I have what are on my list are 7 through 10. These are, I think, inspired by some of the comments that were referenced earlier. So one, people were worried, well, what if I have a relative I'm dropping off in front of my house and there's a bike lane? Am I gonna get a ticket? Or am I gonna get in trouble? And so some of the exceptions we have here are that you can pick up or discharge a passenger. If you were parking the bike lane, that would obviously be a short time period. So we're looking for things that are short time periods that would be permissible, and that way no one will get in trouble. So that's picking up or dropping off a passenger. People nowadays, if you use Uber Eats or a delivery service, or a Walmart, I think if you have a Walmart Plus subscription, I think they deliver your groceries even, that would be permissible, obviously. Because I do know that I think that is the policy of some delivery companies not to use the driveway. So that's particularly important for them. They might get in trouble actually for going into your driveway to do the delivery. The other exception was vehicles that are engaged in loading or unloading, property or passengers. It kind of goes part and parcel with the delivery, but it kind of expands it. So what if you're moving into a house or an apartment or something like that? That covers that. Let's see here. Oh, I have it, okay. So the other one was vehicles engaged, like you hire a landscaper or a snowplower. They're gonna be maybe parked there temporarily to do what you're paying them to do. So those are all kind of more for home property ownership. Now my exceptions that I've listed as 11 through 14 really deal with what I would call traffic situations. So obviously if a police officer is waving you to go into the bike lane to go around a car accident, or if there's some sort of response that way, or you all of a sudden you think you might get into a car accident and you have to swerve into the bike lane. Okay, those are things that would be traffic related. Those would be obvious exceptions there. If you have someone driving towards you, you have to drive into the wrong lane or the bike lane. So those are things for your own personal safety. You don't want to hurt someone in a car accident. So that's 11 through 14. Now 15 through 17 are also, I believe, taken as input from prior meetings. So this would apply. So I know that there is an annual, that's what I've done, is an annual community garage sale or neighborhood rummage sale of the sort. People are saying, well, wait a minute, there's excess parking because that's a well-known event and people come to that every year. So that would be something listed, that if there are people parking in the bike lanes, on the dates of those sales, those are well-known, published in advance. So that would be fine. It's also going to talk about, well, the local church, if there's a wedding or there's a celebration of a religious ceremony, that's also one of the exceptions too, because if the church parking lot, there's a lot of people coming for that particular ceremony, or that's there. And then lastly, there is what we've listed is when parking is actually permitted. Like, parking authority doesn't give tickets on major holidays. It's Martin Luther King Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, and there's some others. Those are listed in the ordinance. And then there's other exceptions as well. So those are what we've got listed in the actual thing that we've been working on. And again, like I said, this isn't set in stone. It's set to be revised after today's meeting. So that's my presentation. And obviously we'll be taking notes on what is said or question.
Will you make comments or ask questions?
Well, once I'm done, I think you guys are going to be able to come up to the podium, is my understanding. So I'm going to, well, you can bring those up in now. So I don't think I'm going to be answering questions like I work for the White House correspondent. So I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, we will begin the public comment now. If you have signed up, please line up on that side of the room. Please remember to state your name and your municipality. We will limit the comments to 3 minutes, so please be respectful of your fellow residents who will be commenting. So whoever wants to come up, you can come right up.
Hi, Adam Trott. I live on Highview Boulevard, and I'm with Bike Erie. I wanted to clarify a few things. One is when people ask, should you ride on the sidewalk? The cutoff for that is age 13. If you're 13 or younger, then that's fine. But if you're older, then I believe it's code 49 that kicks in, that regulates when sidewalks, where they are at and how busy they are. Like, for example, the sidewalks downtown have way too much commerce going on. You're really not supposed to ride on the sidewalk downtown. But suburban areas and things, that would be more permissible. The second thing is to clarify some gray area about what is unloading and deliveries. And the standard is 20 minutes. So if you exceed 20 minutes, usually that's considered, well, you're not loading or unloading something, you're just hanging out. And then the third thing I wanted to clarify is that 38th Street still has a lot of work to do. PennDOT's share rows only go from McClellan to Old French Road. So we need to have PennDOT finish from Old French all the way out to Greengarden. Most of it's easy. East 38th Street was actually very easy. We fought for a bike lane on that, and PennDOT wanted the boulevard instead. That is from Old French to Pine. They wanted to extend that boulevard all the way to McClellan, but they ran into funding problems. So when we came back as Bike Erie and asked, hey, you can't do the boulevard, will you give us the bike lanes? They said no. They're thinking maybe someday they'll get more money and still do the boulevard. But there is a serious challenge on 38th Street when you go through the zoo area and you're in Cherry all the way to Liberty. That's some tough infrastructure. So of everything on the Erie Urban Bike Loop, that's probably the toughest part right there. Other than that, most of it's striping. So thank you for everything the city has done for the Active Transportation Plan. A lot of things we lament that things aren't happening in a more progressive way in Erie. The Active Transportation Plan is to make Erie a more universally acceptable city for everyone. And that's why this is a big deal. And the Erie Urban Bike Loop is the start of that network. So thank you everybody who's helped to make this happen. And I'm glad people are participating because everybody should be heard as we do this. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to make a comment?
I'm Karen Adams. I live at 3315 Greengarden. I want to point out a few things. First of all, on one of your slides, it said that Greengarden is the east border, so to speak. I believe you should change that to west. We were told, well, first of all, basically every time we've been here, whether it's been to council or whether we've been to a meeting of neighborhood with various council members present, every time we are told something different. And that's a frustration and that's a problem. But I also want to speak to the exceptions. We were specifically told that there was no state ordinance and that there was no city ordinance that would ban our parking. Now we're being told that that's not the case. We were told that the city would not pass an ordinance. The city council would not pass an ordinance that would ban our parking. Now let me be clear, parking is not an issue for me, but I know it is for many other residents. So that's going to bring me to all of the exceptions that were noted. It seems to me that the bulk of those exceptions would be happening during daylight hours when there would be more bikers using the bike path, the bike lane, than overnight hours. So why are we going to be limited on any of those other daytime hours, whether it's the weekends or whether it's during the week? Why is that happening? That does not make sense to me. I'm sorry. I believe that, I know that we were not involved. I did not live here in 17 when this started, but I know that for all of us between 26th and 38th Street, we received a letter dated January 18th of last year. And there was an article, we received it on a Saturday, the day before the Friday, the day before, there was an article in the paper about this. That was our first knowledge about any of this. And then the survey that was put out, you couldn't answer it the way you needed to, the way you wanted to. So many of us just gave up and didn't complete it because it was not going to be an honest response to what the questions were. So I would ask, please, that all of this be reconsidered. And the other point that I would like to make is that until all of the plan can be implemented, why can't Greengarden still be a shared lane? Once everything's implemented, then if we need to make changes, everyone will have gotten used to the share part of it, but at least then all of it will be the same. Instead of part share, part bikeway lane, part whatever, I don't understand what the other terminology was. This is going to be a while before the whole thing is put into place, correct? Correct? I'm not talking just Greengarden, I'm talking about the whole bike path plan. Isn't it gonna be a while before all of it is implemented? I mean, Front Street is supposed to be this year. Why can't we remain as a shared lane, especially given all the quote-unquote exceptions, until the whole thing is implemented? That to me is what makes more sense. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eric Brazell. I live on West 27th Street, not far from Greengarden. I've used my bike my whole entire life. I've been an advocate for bicycling in Erie. This is not something that started in 17 or whatever. This is something that the city has been trying to do for 50 years, possibly longer. And I was just amazed that this sort of thing was happening until it all changed. So this improvement effort has to do with the health of every one of us in the community. Our streets have become hazardous to people on bicycles, pedestrians, people in wheelchairs, people driving cars. This also has to do with economics and outside investments, people that consider coming to Erie. This is something that cities that are advancing, this is something they do. They have proper infrastructure for everybody, not just cars. Thank you.
Comments?
Everyone who wants to speak, please line up on the right side of the building. On the right side of the room. So Robert knows who's next. Please and thank you.
Hi, I'm David St. George. I live on Greengarden. I guess to Karen's point, I'd like to say that the residents really haven't been involved, and I'd like to know why. No meetings have ever really been taken with residents and project managers. David Forrest was to be our contact at City Hall about a year ago, and we were supposed to meet with him and talk about the project. He was let go, and there's not been a replacement. How the residents supposed to know who the replacement is?
The replacement for the previous communications director is sitting right next to me.
He wasn't. David Forrest was an engineer, not the communications director. A project engineer, not the communications director. Frontier has a Cockle Bridge project. There have been several meetings in the mayor's neighborhood with residents discussing the bridge options with engineers. Where have the meetings been? Why have the meetings been there and not for Greengarden? Will residents on other streets be ignored like we were? We really haven't met with anyone or talked to anybody. Bill Hayden sent an email last spring to residents after talking to consultants. Last spring he stated, quote, "We will be stopping the bike lane at 26th Street and not continuing on 38th. The current shoulder will remain as is with available on-street parking. The idea is that bikes will ride in the parking lane and traverse around parked cars when needed," end quote. And then this email was overturned a few days later by the communication director. I don't understand how narrow the 26th, going from Greengarden below 26th Street is narrow. And how wide is you say you can have two traffic lanes and 2 bike lanes, and then you still need to maintain 4 feet of distance between the bike and the traffic. How wide is the bike lane below 26th Street? And how wide is the traffic lane? It's very narrow there. I don't see how you can do that and have 4 feet between a biker. And at 26th Street, that's going to be the dangerous spot where everybody's going to have to file into the traffic lane before 26th Street, go across 26th Street riding with traffic. And I know you've given a number of 7,000 cars a day, but at rush hour in the mornings and at rush hour in the evenings, it's wall-to-wall cars there. Your plan is going to be dangerous. you know, no matter what you do, there's not enough room there. So I don't see how you're gonna get cars and bikes through there safely. There's just not enough room. You're gonna need to do something different. I know there's power poles and concrete work to be done. The mayor's another question. What will keep our street from becoming a free-for-all with some bikers going against traffic, or e-bikes on the bike path, joggers and dog walkers in the bike path? And I'm seeing that already. Aren't they going to be an obstacle? Instead of a biker having to go around and park cars, somebody's going to be walking a dog in the street. I'm seeing it already. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to hear an answer to that question.
Hello, I'm Evelyn Westman, and I live on at 2005 West 4th, and in the city. I think the plan is a good one. I think there's a lot of legitimate points about communication from the beginning for that particular neighborhood of the Greengarden. I really do think those are internal communication problems that city seems to have on this particular issue. I don't know where it came from, not being an insider, but I do think that's something that needs to be looked at by the administration and council, and to improve it for the next time. Because if we're going to be doing this citywide plan, you'll have a lot of upset people. And it is a good plan. I believe it's a good plan. I'm a biker. I hope you all bike. And if you don't, start. And on Thursday nights when the weather is good, we have slow roll. And that's meets at Perry Square. And maybe one of these days we'll zip up Greengarden and there'll be a nice bike path. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Gates. I'm a resident of the Lower West Side. I have a whole family of bike commuters, including my teenage kids. I think at this point we all know the benefits of bike lanes, so I'm not going to talk about that. What I did want to talk about was the parking exceptions. I understand that the city, needed to compromise with the Greengarden residents, and a lot of those items in the ordinance are common sense. I use the 6th Street bike lane all the time, and there are, repair vehicles, maintenance vehicles, delivery vehicles. It happens, you don't need an ordinance for that. You just go around, not a big deal. People don't attempt to park their cars there though. The things I did have an objection to were the holidays. I think, maybe if they limited the scope of the holidays, because, when do a lot of people ride bikes? 4th of July, Memorial Day. Those are probably the days that the 6th Street bike lane, the peninsula, those are probably the days they see the most bicycle traffic. So I would propose maybe amending that part. If the city does pass a parking ordinance, I would suggest that it be limited to Greengarden because of the yard sale, because that's unique to Greengarden. What else did I want to talk about? So I also wanted to say that I think the lane should continue all the way to Frontier Park. It doesn't really make sense for it to end at the Bayfront. And I also would like to see a 3-way stop at 8th and Greengarden. So that's all. Thank you.
I'm Gary Lackey. I live on Greengarden Boulevard. And I think most of us would be happy if we could just maintain some parking for our friends and family when we have visitors and that are going to be forced to park, down the crossing street somewhere. It sounds like, even though we've been told, there's parking exceptions, doesn't sound like that's gonna make it in there. And I think that would make us all feel real happy if that was gonna be an exception. But I think it could be an exception if we didn't, the bikers that bike on Greengarden now generally can flow down the traffic lane where the cars do, because it's just as easy to travel Greengarden. It's an LS1 or LST1. It's low stress on the boulevard, and it really doesn't need the overkill of a buffered bike lane. I think that's overkill. But I get it. I mean, if you're going to make a bike lane in there, it really gets tight trying to get cars parked, bikers in there. I've seen it in various places in the city. It doesn't look very friendly to bikers to have a parking lane and then a skinny little bike lane, and so I understand the dilemma. It's just seems like we are going to, those of us who live on the boulevard are going to become more the underserved than those that are, being served by the having bike lanes made for them throughout the city. And I understand that people need to travel all around the city in various kinds of other options besides a vehicle. I just would love to see the traffic sharrows, to me, would be an easy way, especially at the transition at 26th and Greengarden. If they're traveling down along the curb and they're coming into the turning lane there, the turning lane is going to stay like on the, let's say we're going north on Greengarden, we hit 26th. The biker's got to come out of the biking lane and merge into the turning lane with bikers? With travel? Is that how it works there? I know I saw your drawing a little bit, but I still couldn't make sense of it. So I was concerned about bikers traveling in the bike lane and getting to that turn, because cars generally are lined up down there, and currently the parking lane trying to, especially in the mornings, it's really busy right there. So I don't know. I'm just thinking it would seem safer if bikers travel in the travel lane on Greengarden Boulevard, and that would leave the parking alone.
Okay, do we have any other public comment? Any other public comment? Okay, if there's no other public comment, then Dan, would you be able to answer a couple of the questions that were asked?
Yep. Sure. So, related to the questions about the design of the project, the one about why can't all bikeways or bike lanes be implemented at once? Really, it's based on a funding cycle, when funding is allocated for each project. And obviously, there's never going to be enough funding to implement all these bike lanes all at once throughout the entire city. So it's got to be done on a corridor by corridor basis as funding becomes available. The issue of dog walkers and other folks using the bike lane. Today they have a sidewalk where they could walk their dogs, and there's an issue with that.
They're in the street right now.
That sounds like an enforcement problem. I mean,
Who's going to do it?
I can't speak to that, but I mean, that's the local police's jurisdiction to enforce the ordinances of the city. And I think that would probably hold true for any no parking ordinances as well. I mean, it's up to somebody to enforce that. And I guess the last question was about the transition at 26th Street. So north and south of 26th Street, the bike lanes and the buffer will end approximately 100 to 200 feet in advance of the intersection And the way that the travel lanes are oriented, the bikers will transition pretty smoothly into the travel lane. At least northbound, I know that's the case. And so they would become, either in the through direction, or if they wanted to turn left onto 26th Street, they would have to merge over to the left turn lane that's always already there. So we're not making any modifications to the turn lanes in that area.
Is there any markings indicating for the bikers to transition to that?
There will be signing, but no pavement markings. Yes.
Could you address vulnerable street users versus non-vulnerable street users? Just to educate us all as far as why we have bike lanes, why we tend to stay away from being in the road if we can.
I can try to. So, a vulnerable road user is considered anybody who's on a bicycle or a pedestrian who is not in a motor vehicle. They're at much greater risk of being injured in an accident because, motor vehicle tends to travel a lot faster than someone on a bicycle, and certainly much, much faster than a pedestrian. So ideally, all those different categories of users are provided their own space, because when they intermingle, that's when accidents can occur, and usually vulnerable road users have a much higher risk of injury when they're involved in an accident. So a facility like this is ideal to separate users. Vehicle users, motorists get their lane, bicyclists get their lane, pedestrians have a sidewalk, so everybody is segregated, and it should lead to a much safer system. Hopefully that helps. Sure.
Will bike riders be banned from the street on residential parking days?
I don't believe so.
So we can coexist on those days?
That's how they travel around today, any street that doesn't have a bike lane.
Every day is the same. Why can't we get along is the residents' question. We've done this for decades. Why can't we all get along and share the road? On Greengarden, it's 20 feet wide. The mayor says landscape truck can park there, and it's safe for a biker to go around a landscape truck. But if a Toyota is parked there, that's dangerous. We can't do that. How is that? It's not consistent. Temporary for how many? We had concrete work done, and it was a week solid that cement trucks were on the road last year. A week solid, dump trucks, cement trucks, huge trucks. Was there an incident? No. All day long, first thing in the morning, 6 o'clock at night.
We have
5-6
another
days in a row.
question or concern, we can move along.
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind too is you may not be seeing a lot of bicyclists today because there's not a bicycle lane there. Right now, confident riders, sure, they don't mind sharing the road with motorists. They're much more experienced on their bicycles and know how to navigate traffic. But the idea of this plan is to get the less experienced riders out on the road, people who may not be as confident to share the road. So this would provide them their space to travel.
November till April, there's very few riders.
That's not true. That is not true.
We'll take the next question here in the middle.
To me, this seems like this should be a municipal plan. I'm sure there are many people in Berkeley who would like to ride their bikes in the city like I do. Perhaps even Mark Creek and South Townships, so the contiguous South Townships. Why are we not discussing some of the alternatives with that? And for instance, Minster Drive is like wider all the way down to Greengarden.
This plan was specifically for the city of Erie. That was the scope of the project. So I think that's a great idea to expand it in the future.
They have their own active transportation plan, and The peninsula point to that is the Peninsula Drive from 26 North is in far better shape and far wider than Greengarden.
I think the point people are missing here is kind of obvious. They live on Greengarden. My neighbors know. Is anybody in the city here that walks more than we have on meeting? All right? Okay? So, nobody parks in front of their house on Greengarden on purpose. Whether it's temporary or, am I correct, my neighbors? Nobody parks on Greengarden on purpose. I've gone up down Greengarden a gazillion times, and if there's one day, if about a week's time frame, there's a car parked in front of somebody's house on Greengarden, it's not there for home care, all right, situation like that, there's nobody parking there. Why would I park in front of my house on Greengarden when I have a driveway? All right? But, my grandson's going to get baptized in Blessed Sacrament. I brought this up at the original meeting, all right? I was told, invite enough people over that could fit in your driveway. Because we're not going to let them park in front of their house. Now, that's not the most asinine thing I ever heard. I don't know what is. All right, we're not doing this on purpose. It's not temporary. We don't park there unless we absolutely positively have to park there. All right, and I don't know what it's going to take for people to understand that. We don't, let's put our car in front of the house and the biker's got to go around it. We don't do that. All right, I ride my bike all over the place too. Okay, we don't do that. Nothing is being done on purpose. Okay, all we're saying is, in the event of the fact that we have to park in front of our house because of a reason, all right, such as a giant party or whatever it is, all we want to do is get treated like the rest of the citizens of the city of Erie and have the ability to park in front of our house if that were to happen. Now, if I got to call down to Timmy Beverage and say, Tim, I'm going to have a party in front of my house, if I get a ticket, I bring it up to you, all right, or we're running out to work out, or the parking authority running out to work out. We're not here to antagonize. We're just here to say, if we need to, let us. We're not going to, nobody's going to sit there and say, God, now I can park in front of my house because the bike path isn't going to go through. I think the bike path on Saffron is just gorgeous. With that bridge striping and everything else, paint it. Paint it every color you wanted to. That's great. We're not going to park there unless we absolutely have to. I guess that's our, I think everybody on Greengarden should be treated like that. Right? If I just go to Greengarden, I see the white one with the lights on, it's fantastic. I love them. I go up and down the street. I love them. Right? That's great. But don't tell me if I'm having a baptism in my house, I gotta have people park. I can invite 6 people. I think we did it for Christmas. I had 7 cars in my property. All right, but if I didn't have an 8th person invited, they would have parked in front of my house. That's all we're asking for.
I want to ask you something. I'm not trying to be antagonistic at all. I just, maybe somebody knows. What about everyone on West 6th Street? They don't park in front of their house.
I don't live on West 6th Street.
Maybe.
All right, West 6th Street always had a parking lot. West 6th Street, if I'm correct, Ed, you've been around as long as we have. West 6th Street's always had parking lot. Our Greengarden has had parking lot. You're taking something away. Once again, you're taking something away. It doesn't need to be taken away because it's not that big of an issue. All right? And Mr. Nelson one day, is Chuck here? Mr. Nelson, I think for a week or so, was doing the aerial photos of Greengarden. All right? And he goes, out of that week time span, he saw 1 car parked on the street. 1 car parked on the street. So I guess that's all my neighbors are trying to say to us.
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, and I know that you guys don't really park on the street, but what about when the plan is implemented on different streets that don't have big driveways?
They're not going to have. You're not going to restrict the parking. You can't restrict the parking on the streets you show us.
I think that what really is going on here right now is that there's a mechanism being put in place to encourage bicycling. And I don't know of any bicyclist that I've met that is militant, that wants to punish people. I think what this is doing is this is creating a mechanism by which if somebody is just obstinate and wants to be antagonistic, then the city has a mechanism by which it can say, hey, stop doing that. But honestly, birthday parties, anniversaries, graduation, I don't know of a bike that's going to get kicked off because someone was in that.
Bikers are not as banned on the residential days. You're already saying there are days when we have both. There's gonna be days, the days that are listed. So if it's good on 10 days, why isn't it good all the time? It's not consistent.
But 10 days is to enhance an expectation of the residents needing additional parking for friends and family. That's why those holidays are there, and those holidays.
So we should have my son's birthday on the 4th of July.
It doesn't enforce on those days. So.
My son should graduate on New Year's.
But I think the whole idea is that no one is trying to make a mechanism for punishment. It's simply to give the city something to rely on if somebody's being hostile. That's all it is.
Why can't we get along and share the road like has been done?
There's a question, so let's take the question here in the middle.
So I just want to validate or ask a question of Amanda and Eric, because I know that you guys like all over town and stuff. But we've lived on Greengarden for 31 years, and there have been bikers up and down all 31 years of that. And there have been times that the biking has increased, and there have been times that we haven't seen as much of it. We're seeing more now, which is fine. It's not an issue now. That's why I really don't understand why we're even going down this road. I mean, have there been concerns with your bike groups on Greengarden specifically that they were hit by a car or, because we haven't seen that, so I'm just asking that question, just trying to.
It's not Greengarden specifically, the whole point is to make a network, like a green network, so that you can get anywhere in town within a couple blocks, being on a bike lane, and just, it's a safe way.
But they've already done a more list so that people can share the road. Why are you making us, well, you can't park on your street, we're not doing shared road or that.
So here's what this is all about. When I was a kid, I grew up in that neighborhood. I rode everywhere. There was pure cars, pure craziness going on the road. Maybe people this direction. In the past, there was no reserve. It was a free-for-all. Wait. In the last 3 years, deaths on the roads have gone up phenomenal. And it isn't bicycles, it's just pedestrians, it's cars too. So our highways, our roads have been built, this is the design principle, have the maximum amount of cars, maximum amount of speed. And it's just not a good human principle. It's not a good city principle. Cities across the planet have been doing this type of stuff for a long time. And it's just, to me, it's insane to not have a safe way for everybody to get around the community. Excuse me. It's just, it's nothing new. It might be new to a lot of us here, but obviously a lot of these people, you just don't understand what this is all about. And you need to read.
Why should we like on the road? It's not like we're telling you can't come here. We let you. We just don't want to give up our parking.
I guess my question
We'll
was.
share the road with you, but we're not telling you what car to put on Greenland. We're just telling you how we don't take any of our parking rights.
The question for the solicitor. Okay, I'm having a birthday party at my house and the red car comes up and I put tickets on the cars. I'm able to walk and say, hey, look, this is, we had an understanding with whoever, all right, that we have an exception, this is an exception to the exceptions. All right, why, if I get a ticket, are they going to write me a ticket? This is what's going to happen. If this goes through and it's passed as it is, this is going to come up.
Have you policed that?
Yeah, how is it going to be policed?
You have police officers on Greengarden Boulevard right now who could balance the bike.
put speeders everywhere. So, just saying.
I don't know anything about that. But to answer your question, what everyone is concerned about sounds like to me is enforcement. Everyone is nervous and scared that if I park my car, my kid is home from college, no room in the driveway, park out front, are they going to get a ticket?
Yes.
No one wants to get a ticket. No one wants. I understand the process. I've got parking tickets. Now, the city, I think everyone talks about why can't we share the road perhaps or work together. The city asking for the same thing in a way. What they're trying to say is we have an ordinance. We're trying to implement this bike plan. The ordinance is to protect the bikers, so the pedal bikes, places. I'm not talking about the motorized scooters, the e-bikes. That's not what I'm talking about. So we're trying to use for exercise and economics, all the other stuff we talked about. The city's not going to be there 24/7 to enforce it. Now, one of the things that have been done in other cities, which is not part of this, is there could be like a contact person in the city somewhere, maybe with a parking authority, and you say, hey, I'm going to make up a date, June 25th, we're going to birthday for you. Call the parking authority. If someone leaves a message and says, okay, I'm gonna have a party where you're parking in the bike lane, maybe on June 25th. If the parking authority person is going by there, they'll know that you called in that's going on. Then you're right. You're 5 cars out there. How can you get tickets? You could, I guess, graciously say, my party, I wanted one to pay for the tickets. You don't even want to do that. Right?
Now, this,
Okay. But so I think that's a possibility. But that's why we're having this conversation, and that's why we're having this meeting in particular. So I think that might alleviate some of the enforcement issues, because it really sounds like the residents, and correct me if I'm wrong, don't really use the street for parking, but there are moments during the year. And that's why one of the exceptions was like church ceremonies. That's kind of vague. That's because, again, we're still working on this.
We don't go to church at our house, no.
I understand that, but maybe we could have Bible studies. I don't know. I'm not going to judge anyone particularly. Right. So I think maybe you have a contact person with the parking authority or the city hall, and then we say, hey, June 25th, whatever the time period is. Something like that.
Does that change anything now?
What
Would it be cars on the street, the bikers?
So it helps. What you guys want, my understanding is to avoid the enforcement. Collect tickets. You don't use the street except for special occasions. That's what I hear. So the birthday, they don't care. The birthday is a special occasion, the baptism is a special occasion, that kind of stuff.
No, is it going to be easy to get somebody on the line?
All it is, honestly, nowadays with cell phones, if there's this is an idea, I just presented literally now.
we're talking this up.
So you can always screenshot the phone number, and then send that down to whatever, if there's a mistake. I'm not saying mistakes won't be made, but that's just a suggestion here. Otherwise, what I put together here was try to be like kind of like general categories that should apply to the whole system. I mean, some of them are kind of common sense, some of them are specific to Greengarden, like the annual yard sale. That came out of the commentaries from before. That's not something I would have thought. So that's my one suggestion.
Actually, I'm an educator and I teach college students. And in the US, but all over the world, right? Institutions have typically been accessible to very few people, right? Usually it's upper class, in the US, usually the slices, but very important. And so, what we had, and I'm not going to go into lecture, but what we had to do when we make institutions more inclusive is take into account the needs of everyone, right? So when we talk about people with low income or access to education, also having similar access have to navigate what we want to have access to, especially, and I think that this is a problem that's unique to Erie, right? And this is probably there are solutions, us, that's the one that we mentioned, but also other solutions that are in cities where residents have had similar solutions. I think we thought of this some have other cities or other places around the world that are probably more populated than Erie is, right? How they come up with solutions. Because there is people who know that there are certain rules of commuters who move on the world when there is infrastructure. This is not to undermine the concerns that you're bringing, but I think those are not the concerns. There are probably solutions in other cities, other parts of the country, and the ones that have come up with solutions that are acceptable for residents.
Carol. I was just wondering if why can't we allow them to use the site? I mean, that I think we're in this put in place many years ago.
I would challenge you,
Because now I got the
put
curb
somewhere
cuts
inside
where
and
you
see
can,
how it goes.
we have the curb cuts where they don't go like down.
I will probably let you know to answer that question. I would assume some of the project will come to the sidewalk.
If I make for 1 second, this would make a hell of a lot more sense if we had West 38th Street done already. Right now, there is no bike path until we do 12 blocks on Greengarden. And that's what we're supposed to complain about. Things have been done behind your back, I have no problem. I don't know how many facilities that we have, how many people got killed on Greengarden on bicycle since they've been sharing that road that one line. 0, right? Why did it have to be a secret? 2 bids you guys put out. We never even got a copy of the bids, know what you're doing. I'd love to see how you could do 26th Street down to the Bayfront. My concern is the bikers. It's not the bike lane. I want a good, safe bike lane, but you're not going to get one going down Greengarden unless you move tracks and cut 20 feet of hill when you get down to 12th Street because it narrows.
And that was a question, how wide is the road, the lane, and the bike lane, and you're gonna have a 4-foot buffer there? It can't be. How, on your plan up there, how wide is the traffic lane and how wide is the bike lane?
It varies throughout the corridor. It depends which segment you're talking about. At the narrowest portion between 16th Street and 25th Street, well, I think it's 21st Street, we're providing a 10-foot travel lane and a 5-foot bike lane. So, you know,
So there's not.
there are certainly tractor trailers that use that segment of roadway.
Again, to safety is all I'm saying there. And this whole thing could have been averted if we had this kind of conversation before the plans went in. We talked to everybody at PennDOT, and I said everything is in design stage. We're finishing 12 blocks on Greengarden with nothing else in place, except Cray Street that goes to no place, and French Street, which is going to be a big development. I just, I want the safety of the bikers, that's important. But I also want our people that pay their taxes in this town to know what's going on.
Yeah, there's nobody here from Front Street, and you're supposed to start that soon.
This meeting in particular is to discuss Greengarden Boulevard and not French Street. That will be a later project, a separate project. So the design for this project and the bids and everything, those are public documents. It was not bid through the City of Erie, it was bid through PennDOT. But all of these documents are publicly accessible. There was nothing hidden or kept from anybody. All of these documents are publicly accessible if you desire to see them.
Request to see bids.
I'm sorry, what was
I
that?
said I got 2 requests to see bids, I did not see one.
I can't speak to that. I didn't see any requests, but they don't go to me. Like I said, it's been through PennDOT.
And I really swore off. I thought that we ended up right up to Mrs. Trans. They said we're in the design stage. But we're not in the design stage, it's rework, so it's supposed to confuse.
I can tell you the folks in the city engineering department were well aware when this project was advertised, when the bids came in,
I'm sure they were.
what the costs were associated with it.
I wasn't privy to the information when I asked them. That's all I'm saying.
I can't speak to that.
It wasn't an issue.
We have a question up front here.
I have a question not about the Greengarden as the corridor as a whole, for the winter cycling, because I am a winter cyclist. Do you guys have a plan to help keep the bike lanes clear in the winter months? I know that would help keep the bicycle traffic more consistent year round. For example, in Norway, they have a city where 50% of the population bikes year round. Are we going to have our bike lanes cleared within, say, an inch or two of snow so that cyclists can be safe riding and not worry about riding in the top of the low proper as I have to do now, because it's the only clean spot?
Right, that's a great question. I believe that would fall under typical snow removal procedures. That's also one of the benefits of not installing the vertical delineator posts is to allow a standard size snow plow to remove the snow along the corridor. So there shouldn't be any issues with snow removal if there aren't any today. In the back?
So just as an FYI, we filed a right to know request last year, and we were wanting the minutes from the meetings, all the meetings that went up to these decisions that were made, and we were told that there were no meeting minutes that were available for us to see. How can that be?
I can't speak to that. I mean, these are public council meetings, so I would refer to the city council on that. I can't answer that.
See who the participants in it were, because we thought, well, maybe we were being represented, but we couldn't see who any of the attendees for any of the meetings were. I just, that's the law, that you have to give that information.
Quick comment. I handle some of the right to knows. There's a possibility you ask for meeting minutes of a transcript. No one's going to produce a transcript after today. Meeting minutes aren't really official. You may have directed to go to the city's YouTube channel or their Facebook channel. So I know there are these meetings, the Facebook meetings, if they're recorded, are posted on those. That's probably what
I'm talking about, like, from 2017 when these meetings, the Active Erie meetings started.
They're referencing the last one. In 2017, I don't know. But normally I would say that
We were just,
direct you to the YouTube channel for certain movies.
well, thank you for that. And we are actually watching that on a regular basis now. But back then, when this impetus was being developed and there was being discussion about all of this, we wanted to know who was sitting at that table that was making these decisions without involving the stakeholders that were going to be most impacted by it.
Yeah,
Not most impacted.
If the answer to your right to know was does not exist, that means that when they search for it, they did not. And there is, and I know that there is the company that handles the recordings for storage purposes, it doesn't keep them that far back. So if you would make a request, like say last year, the year before, there's a possibility that it was erased after say a 5-year period.
Well, but it all goes back to skills of communication. So if we fix that, then we fix the rest.
It sounds like she's looking for information when the active transportation plan is being created. That's what I think they're looking for. So how that was handled, I think there are some reports that they can say, but I'm not sure how to get them. But yeah, I know they went around the city, hit places, but I don't know how
before I ever was on one of the task forces. That's kind of what we're talking about that, because we're
Right.
talking to guys from the fire department, guys from the police department, they were oblivious to this, and they're on the task force. So, it's just, anyways.
I know a copy of the Active Transportation Plan final study is available on the city website. It's on the same Active Transportation Plan
We wanted
page.
to know how it all developed and what the conversation was at the meetings and those kind of things. Because anyone that is on project management, I would think that there would be documentation of this was discussed, this was the assignment, those kind of things. And maybe that doesn't happen in all places.
I'd like to just, about design and implementation, it just seems like buffer bike lane down Greengarden is just ahead of its time. If it ever would need to be done, because 38th Street and north of 26th on Greengarden could really use that buffer bike lane up there and down there. Not on the boulevard. I mean, the boulevard doesn't have 8,000 cars going both directions, a day. I don't think it's suggested. No, just a buffer, 3-foot buffer lane beside a bike lane. It just needs so much overkill, and it just eliminates us from being able to have that anxiety of having to figure out who to park in it. And it just seems unnecessary to do it here now. It just seems like, why not work on 38, or why not work on north of 26? What Bill Eichmann suggested seemed like a great common sense thing. I don't necessarily expect that out of government or city government or anything. I mean, it makes sense. Just, we're going to leave Greengarden alone for now. We're just letting you guys know. We're just going to put signs so people know it's a bike lane. But I think the bikers are even safer traveling as they do now, especially at the intersection of 26 and Greengarden. And
I think we heard from some of the bike advocates about 38th Street in particular and how the shared lane markings there are not the safest means. So that kind of ties in, though, to why we want to provide bike lanes where we have the space, preferably buffered bike lanes where we have the space. And that section between 26th Street and 38th Street has the existing pavement available that can be reallocated for bike lanes and a painted buffer. And so that's the reason why we decided on that type of bike facility.
It's going to be that much safer than it is now, in my mind. It's safe, it's eligible, it's safe. Not to drive Greengarden. It's not safe to go Greengarden north to 26 or 38 over to Greengarden. It's just, those are two unsafe connectors. Need help.
I mean, there are future plans.
You can keep a 4-foot buffer on the lower part of Greengarden, below 26th Street. You said it was a 10-foot lane and a 5-foot spot for the bikes. There are large trucks that go down. There's cement trucks and what have you that go down by the tracks. So if you have a 10-foot truck, or even a 9-foot truck, and a biker's got to take up like 2.5 feet, you're not going to maintain 4 feet between the biker and a large vehicle there. How can you say that's good?
I believe
You're not
that
gonna
the street
maintain
is
4
the
feet
same
there.
width as West 6th Street, where there is a bike lane on either side, and travel that lane daily. And I don't think we want to be.
Just narrow bike.
So if you think about what happens today if there's a bicyclist in that section where it's 15 feet wide and a tractor trailer is driving down, there's no painted bike lane, and they have to pass a bicyclist, what do they do today? Well, they either slow down and follow the cyclist until they can safely pass, or there's no oncoming traffic and they go into the opposing traffic, pass the bicyclist, and keep on their way. And so what we're doing is providing a safe lane for the bicyclists, but really not.
But you're not maintaining 4 feet. You just got it on the screen, really.
Then there's other options. Either the motorist has to follow behind the bicyclist, or they have to wait for a safe point to pass that bicyclist by crossing into the opposing travel lane. That's the law. That's how it's intended.
Yeah, I'd like to offer that one of the things that, following this process, one of the things that has been encouraging is that government develop when it moves in incremental changes. And right now, we've got an environment where there's radical stuff trying to push the pendulum way too far on one way or the other. This process has been navigating its way for an incremental change. So they've done a lot of revisions based on neighbor input, which I really enjoy. I'm a huge advocate for that. And it's not perfect, but there's two reasons why this plan is not perfect. One is the funding would be astronomical to blow a protected bike lane from 38 down to 14 park. It would just be astronomically expensive. So by doing an incremental, catching the low throughput where you can, having some identification where, okay, this isn't as nice as the bike lane you just did 10 blocks of, so pay attention. Same thing with motorists. Motorists start to see that if it's signed well, motorists will start to adapt their habits, knowing, okay, I'm coming up to 26 in Greengarden, there's bike merging, okay, so I'm starting to get the hang of this. And that way, the incremental change is getting it started and getting the cultural change that has to happen. And then eventually, when enough people are riding those lanes, then that gives the gravitas to say, okay, we need to invest more and clean up these trouble spots. I've done the Erie Bike Trail dozens and dozens of times. And, there are those tough areas, and I know they're too expensive to do right now. But if we get it going, and we give the people enough opportunity to start using that mode of transportation for health reasons, economic reasons, there's a lot of people with DUIs that can't do a car, they have to ride a bike. But, the incremental progression to get to the end game is what I'm seeing right now, and I'm very encouraged that it's happening. And again, like I said earlier, I'm glad everybody's weighing in. That has to be part of the process.
It's a consistency thing. If we can have bikers going below 26th Street and it's narrower and trucks coming and they'll have to stop and, give them room. But when we come down Greengarden, where it's a 20-foot wide lane and there's all kinds of room, you can't park there. The days when the mayor says we can park there and the bikers can go down the street at the same time, it's good on that day, it's not good on another. It's just a consistency.
It's not ideal, it's just a compromise.
It's not consistent.
Right, but it's a compromise. It's not the ideal. It's not the ideal for us. It's not the ideal for you guys. Why doesn't the money go where it is unsafe and where it's safe? Because it's already safe there. I mean, like, Gary's in it, they did a bikeway, but I don't understand why the money would be put there first, even before it's put where it is unsafe.
Because it's so much more than it is. To tear up curves and expand the path, the paved path there, it's really expensive. But I will say that bicyclists have as much at stake about being concerned that this type of mechanism that's being created isn't weaponized, because bicyclists would get a huge political pushback if bicyclists suddenly went around and started posting people's cars, hey, get out of our bike lane and stuff like that. We have as much to risk as you do about being obstinate about, no, keep my bike lane perfect. We all want to go. And I think this is going to be a nice opportunity to show that, you know what, we can actually make one.
I would agree with that more if we use that for parking on a consistent basis, and we don't. It's just occasional.
That's what makes this possible. Is if I'm a bicyclist, there's a car in my bike lane, I'm not going to raise a flag unless that person has a sign in his window that says bikers can bike, and they put their car in that lane every day. Then it's like, yeah, okay, now you're not being very friendly. But I don't see that happening. I think we have a chance to really show, yeah, we can all get along and move this step forward.
I have a question. So we have 30
38th Street shared, are the East 38th Street people able to park on East 38th Street where it has the bike lane sharing? Okay, no parking on 38th. Because I do see people like around 38th and Warsaw area parking in the grass on the sidewalk, and maybe that's why they're not parking on the street.
There was never parking there.
Yeah, there was no.
So you could never park on 38th Street. Okay. Parking on Fairmont, there's a bike lane on Fairmont. Can you park on Fairmont? You can park on Fairmont with the bike lane. Yeah, okay. Parade Street, there's a bike lane. Can you park on Parade Street? So I've been in the suburb of Cincinnati on a bike path that follows a river that used to be a railroad, and the railroad got removed, and it's a bike path, and they said it can almost go to Cleveland. Are we ever going to connect with Cleveland?
That's a separate, there's actually another, what is the group that's?
Well, Erie County Parks and Joy Farms Old is running that whole connecting Erie to Erie Pittsburgh trail lines. That's a whole trip.
Right, so eventually it will go
They're
from
studying
Dobbins Landing to Pittsburgh, which you can ride all the way to DC. And that's already completed. That's a whole different project.
Another thing is, today, a motorized bicycle was sharing the sidewalk with me, and I did get like a little, that, yeah, because when they're coming at you and you're walking, you just,
They're
on the sidewalk. But my husband, years ago, when he was a young teenager, got hit on 6th and Peninsula. And so there is a need for biking, bike lanes, and car lanes.
Okay, so I think we had some good conversation here. Thank you to our presenters. And just a reminder, the Active Erie Transportation Plan is on the city's website, so please take a look at it. And more to come on this. One final question?
One more comment that hasn't been brought up tonight. First of all, I'm thankful to you for the latest potential lane changes at various sectors. That's very positive. It has slowed traffic down in the morning rush hour, but it has not slowed traffic otherwise. And if we're going to have the bike lane, whether it's a shared lane or a bike lane, we still need more presence and to enforce the speed limit on green card. And I think it's safer for everybody, but especially for the bike lane.
Thank you for that.
Until that time. Yeah.
There was
A couple of weeks ago, I was watching and a car pulled over into the bike lane, parking lane, whatever you want to say. I live at 3300 block, pulled over all the way to 32nd Street. And they were not doing 25 miles an hour. And that was because everybody was stopped because of the new light, which is great. But until we get everybody on board, we need more assistance from the police department. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much. Safe travels home.